Hello, young scholars. This is Mr. Martirone. Welcome to World Cultures. And in this video, we're going to be taking a look at the historical thinking skills that we'll be practicing this school year. Alrighty, so the first historical thinking skill we're going to look at is called scale switching. And scale switching is when people move between events, details, questions, and narratives from different perspectives. So imagine if I showed you a series of photos. For example, we could zoom in on a photo of an apartment building and a street light, or we could zoom out at a different scale and look at a huge panorama where we get a much broader sense of the street, the intersection, and the size of place. Or we could rotate it and look at a portrait mode, which focuses in on a crisp street light or lamp. Each picture gives us different details. Another example, you could zoom in on a beautiful sunset of Mount Rainier. You could zoom out and see more of the foreground and zoom out even more and get more pictures of the city. Scale switching is just like that. We can zoom in on a particular event or zoom out on the past. Another example, if you took your arms and stretched them out, from fingertip to fingertip would be the entire history of the planet Earth. One fingertip would be the formation of the Earth, and then the other fingertip would be present day. Or you could zoom in on your hand. For example, your wrist would be where first multicellular life begins. Present day is still where your fingertip is, but the scale is different. So this year during class, we might zoom in on a particular historical event or zoom out to get the bigger picture. This idea of scale switching enables us to cover all of world history in a single year. The next historical thinking skill we're going to take a look at is close reading. So whenever you get a text for this class, you're going to want to read it 3 times. The first time, you're going to be skimming for the gist. The second reading is when you read it to actually understand the content. And then finally, the third time you read a piece of text is you're trying to corroborate things based on what you already know and what you plan to learn with that unit. When you're close reading, you should be asking yourself, what claims does the author make? What evidence does the author use? And is the author trying to persuade you of a particular topic? And how does the author use language to indicate the author's perspective? The third historical thinking skill we're going to look at is causation. Causation attempts to explain why and how a person or event or trend can affect someone or something else. Things in history don't just happen. There's a variety of causes. So you could have an economic or political or environmental or technological cause for something. So when answering a causation prompt, you might want to begin a sentence by saying, a primary or contributing factor of something was. A secondary or underlying cause was. Looking at the Civil War as an example, we can see some of the main causes. Obviously, the long-term cause of the Civil War was the institution of slavery, which was ratified into the Constitution in 1789. As the United States grew bigger, the balance of power between the southern states and northern states began to disrupt the Union, and there were sectional divides. And then finally, in 1860, Abraham Lincoln is elected president, prompting southern states to secede from the Union. The triggering event of the Civil War, what started it all, was the firing of Fort Sumter in April of 1861. Contextualization is another important historical thinking skill, and it allows you and historians to use thinking that involves connecting historical events and processes to a specific time and place. Contextualization allows you to put things such as pictures and documents in a much broader context of the times. The final historical thinking is changing continuity over time. Continuity means things staying the same. Change means things are different. So if we look at farming in the world, well, a continuity is that every farmer was ultimately about food production. And that's true. 500 years ago, 100 years ago was about food production. Farming 10 years ago and even today is all about food production. But one of the changes we can see happening throughout the years is that the percentage of people in farm has decreased dramatically. So examining changes in continuity throughout history enables students and historians to understand the broader scale of history. Now let's take a look at our historical frames. A frame is a tool for organizing the past. Each frame highlights certain aspects of history while leaving others in the background. We'll be using 3 main frames: communities, production, and distribution. The communities frame focuses on how people organize themselves, families, villages, cities, empires, and nations. It looks at identity, belonging, and how communities grow, shrink, and change over time. For example, through this frame, we might study how the Roman Empire expanded or how modern nations are formed. The production and distribution frame looks at how people make and share resources, things like food, tools, technology, and wealth. It asks, how do societies produce goods, and how do they distribute them? Think about the Silk Road or the Industrial Revolution. This frame highlights those systems of productions and trade. And finally, the networks frame. The networks frame explores connections between people and places, the movement of ideas, religions, technologies, and goods. Through this lens, we can see how cultures interact, like the spread of Buddhism across Asia or the global impact of the internet. In our course, you'll use frames to guide your thinking. We'll compare events through different frames, test claims, and practice shifting scales. Sometimes zooming in on a single community, and other times zooming out to global networks. By the end of the year, you'll see how frames help us make sense of both the past and the present.